Hello, everyone. You're watching the Founders Forum. My name is Verikokkos, and we have a great show for you guys tonight. So, today's topic is basically political violence and how divided our country has been. So, I guess we'll just jump right into it. So, I guess marking today, there's been exactly 320 mass shootings in the U.S. since the beginning of 2025, and most of them were driven by political views. You know, um, so that's basically just shows you how people turn their political views into violence now. It's just another way to get your anger out. But yeah, so just like there's today, there was a man drove his car through a church, shot up the place and then burned it down. Um, in fact, no, there was yeah, that was one out of the three shootings in 14 hours. So that was pretty harsh to see. And then of course, you have the assassination attempts and assassinations. Charlie Kirk in on September 10th, Donald Trump. A year ago on July 13th. I think there was someone assassinated a Congress member too, but that was like a decent amount of time ago. But it just shows that you can't even have an opinion in this country anymore. I guess you can try, again, not trying to promote political violence here, but I guess people can understand that there was actually actual reason behind the assassination against Trump or the congressman, because those are people who actually make the laws and set them into action, who are making the changes. Um, but Charlie Kirk, he was just, a man with a message, an opinion, who wanted to spread faith about, his religion and, his political views too. Um, and so, yeah, it just seems like people just want to silence everyone. And I'm not talking about, starting a conspiracy about how it was Israel that, went after Charlie Kirk, because I don't believe that. Um, but yeah, it just seems like, again, a lot of people, want to say that we're on the brinks of a civil war. Do I think it's going to be like that? No, because I just don't think that, the American citizens would let ourselves get to that point. And you really, even if we did get close to that point, you just have to take a step back and realize that no one would really win. Nothing would happen. It would just tear our country apart. Um, you know, it just seems like if you say you're Trump, like if you say you're a Trump supporter, public right, then you have to worry about getting jumped, getting mugged, just something bad happening to you. That's why I think it wasn't a little. I don't think it was too smart that Charlie Kirk had his events, outside and in public, where literally anybody could do anything. I know he had bodyguards to, protect him in case anybody ran up and tried to stab him or just assault him. But there's nothing to protect him against if he's, just out in the open. There's nothing to protect him against the bullet, right? Because he's not a president or a candidate. He's just, he's just got his opinion, so he doesn't really get Secret Service protection. But it just, it's really just it's silencing a lot of people out there because no one can have an opinion anymore because something bad might happen to you. People aren't they were getting refused the service in restaurants, where their cars are getting wrecked. There's protests in the streets, like L.A. and most of the cases, it goes beyond just protesting. It starts going to rioting. Um, but yeah, and I don't really want to go against Trump in this way, but of course you have January 6th, right? It was just a nice peaceful protest, and then it turned into a storm in the Capitol. Um, but I just my opinion on January 6th is, I guess, that it was kind of cool to see that, I guess, in a way, because people obviously didn't agree with the government. They think that they rigged it, and of course the people do have the right to overthrow the government if they feel that they're abusing power or in something along the lines of that. But of course, it was, listen, I'm not gonna back up Trump in 2020. I do think he lost the 2020 election. Um, so I don't think he won. But again, you have to look at the voters, like, through their view. It's like when you're storming the Capitol. I mean, what were they gonna expect to happen? Because once, let's just say they did get control of Mike Pence or Nancy Pelosi. Well, what were they actually gonna hang them? Like, and if they did, then that wouldn't really do anything for them. It would make things worse for them. But of course, they didn't have to worry about that because all the people who did, well, not all of them, but a decent amount of the people who were, arrested for, their crimes on January 6th, they were pardoned by Trump. So I guess they kind of got out of it, but I don't know. It just seems like our country is just so divided now. You just look at the politics itself. Like, the campaigns going back at each other. Back in the day, it was just everyone was still respectful. They realized that although yes, they did have different political views, they still respected their views and didn't make fun of them. They were respectful still. Because it seems like, and you can't say, because it is true that Trump did start this, kind of thing with politics. It just seems like now that it's more about who has better insults than who has better policies. So, and Trump did start that because everybody knew that in 2016 he was the one who basically started making fun of his opponents. Everybody kept it kind of neutral, and if you look back at Barack Obama's presidential debate with Mitt Romney, right? They realized that they had different views, but they still respected each other, and that's the way it should be. And not just with the presidents themselves, but with the people too. You have to realize that at the end of the day, even though you don't agree with your president, he's still the president of the United States, so you still have to respect him in a way. So, like back in the day, people, like, it was looked down upon to, make fun of the president. They didn't have bumper stickers or, signs making fun of the president, right? It was just, people realized that, yes, even though I don't agree with him, I'm still going to respect him because he's still the president. And so, that's that, really. And yeah, it just seems like, whoever has better insults, right? And if you look on social media with the Team Trump or the Kamala HQ, right? They're making fun of each other with videos and audios and saying this and that to them. It was just never like that back in the day. There's clearly a big difference about how people pick their presidents now. But yeah, so I guess that basically sums up the video about political violence and how it's kind of taking a toll on our country. So yeah, that's that. Thank you for tuning in, and see you in the next video.